The Bermuda Triangle. While you might think of it as a perfectly triangular zone between Puerto Rico, Florida, and Bermuda, the so-called Devil's Triangle is anything but clearly defined. For decades, this stretch of almost 500,000 square miles of ocean has been credited with some of modern history's greatest mysteries. What is to blame for these disappearances? Did a buildup of methane bubbles cause a 540-foot boat to explode? Or was it something more sinister and more alive, reaching up from the water? Did a cyclone bring down a fleet of Navy bombers, or could a wormhole be to blame? Theories range from practical to extraterrestrial, and though scientists have a new theory that debunks suggestions about aliens or the Lost City of Atlantis, all the details that we don't know makes it tempting to see some truth in how those theories came to be. We know what has gone missing, and for the most part, when. The where, why, and how, though, have remained unanswered, as more and more vessels head off in the direction of a blue horizon and never return. The secrets held in the Triangle's choppy waters and unruly skies have eluded scientists for years. Many of the wrecks and ships lost at sea have yet to be recovered, which isn't surprising given the truly staggering depths the seafloor there reaches. Take the Puerto Rico Trench at the Triangle's southernmost point, for example. At 8,400 meters below sea level into the Earth's crust, there aren't even that many vessels capable of descending down and exploring the vast unknown darkness. As technology speeds up, though, we have begun to get a clearer picture of the undersea universe of the Bermuda Triangle. Stories of adventure and exploration always have and always will capture the human imagination. We anticipate stories to have logical endings, but when the facts don't line up, our minds will wander into fantastical places. So by the time 50 ships and 20 airplanes mysteriously disappeared within its boundaries, the myth of the Bermuda Triangle found a life of its own where so many had lost theirs. Today, the myths have been debunked by one outstanding theory, but with countless vessels and explorers still lost at sea, perhaps there's a chance that uncovering more evidence will show that the Bermuda Triangle holds more secrets than we ever could have imagined. So, let's dig into some of the most fascinating stories of disappearing vessels, but first we need to define the location and existence of the Triangle. It's not as clear-cut as you might think. We know there's no concrete landmarks that resolutely define the Bermuda Triangle. Roughly located between Miami, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda, the waters of the Triangle attracts tourists, shipping vessels, and people ferrying to and from locations. The first mention of the Bermuda Triangle was in a 1964 edition of Argosy magazine, a cult science fiction magazine known for its stories about wild adventures and musings about extraterrestrial beings. Vincent H. Gaddis begins his article, "The Deadly Bermuda Triangle," with a fateful question that would go on to define the region for decades to come. What is there about this particular slice of the world that has destroyed hundreds of ships and planes without a trace? This was the first time someone had linked the seemingly unrelated accidents and credited it to something mysterious. While myths had circulated around the disappearances and unrecovered vessels, the thought that dozens of manned crafts vanished without a trace in the same region was immediately unsettling. From that point on, any tragedy or questionable weather activity was attributed to the mysterious forces at work within the Bermuda Triangle. But the rise of the myth of the Bermuda Triangle coincides with a few key inventions that made it possible to disseminate theories. A big contribution to interest in the Atlantic coincided with advances in image capturing technology in the 1950s. The first image of Earth was taken from a satellite in 1959. It doesn't have the same level of detail we might be used to today, and it verges on a little abstract, but the capability to capture images of the Earth from space ushered in a new era of sea exploration. With better image capturing technology from space, humans' bird's-eye view of the sea helped to paint a clearer picture of previously unexplored areas. Additionally, meteorologists had access to evidence of storm systems and weather patterns in ways they couldn't have imagined previously. These discoveries have changed and challenged the theories put forth about the Bermuda Triangle. But before we can attempt to debunk any mysteries, we need to understand the context surrounding these theories. Television sets had been introduced to the public in the 1930s, but it took until the late 40s for them to become commonplace in some nations. While radio transmissions had long enabled hosts and commentators to craft stories using colorful language and intonation, with the advent of TV, news took on a visual element that let viewers get what felt like a first-hand look at the scene where something happened. Events that took place on the other side of the world could be seen in your living room, making it easier to imagine parts of the world they'd never been to. But when something happened and there were no images, no videos, no recordings to latch onto, many people felt the need to invent an explanation to boats and planes that had gone missing. Vincent Gaddis's article wasn't the first time someone looked out to the Sargasso Sea and imagined something powerful at work. But his writing sparked a whirlwind of interest in the cases of the lost planes and ghost ships he mentions. Interestingly, however, he offered no theory as to what might have been to blame for the activity in the triangle, but by giving it a name and tapping into humans' innate curiosity to understand the how, when, and where of the stories we hear, Gaddis opened the floodgates for pop culture to capitalize on the mystery of the sea. The theories that followed would instill fear in many, but seemed to captivate just about anyone who encountered them. So let's examine several of these mysteries up close. Boats have been navigating the waters between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico for centuries, if not millennia. It's estimated that the people known as the Lucayans used boats to island hop in the Bahamian archipelago starting 1,000 years ago. That being said, there's no way to say how many boats have sunk in the Atlantic since humans have begun navigating its waters. It's not in any way a modern phenomenon, but using Gaddis's account of the Bermuda Triangle's mystery to guide our inquiry, the disappearances on the water saw an uptick starting in the late 1800s. Let's start with the HMS Atalanta, a 26-gun naval frigate. The vessel had seen action in the Keeling Islands out in the Indian Ocean before making its way towards the Bermuda Triangle. Originally named the HMS Juno, the Atalanta had come to the area to serve as a training vessel. In 1879, the Atalanta set out with a crew of 280 on her docks. Records show that as a part of the vessel's third training expedition, it stopped off in Bermuda. An outbreak of yellow fever had spread among the crew, so the ship's captain, Francis Sterling, kept his crew on a tight schedule and soon set sail to return to Portsmouth, a destination they would never reach. They left Bermuda in late January with plans to arrive home in April. After a mysterious event at sea, all 280 were presumed lost and declared dead in June of 1880. A boat of that size disappearing without a trace is also unimaginable. Theories arose about rogue waves hundreds of feet tall. Thoughts of Jules Verne's Kraken came to mind. As science fiction had come to dominate the literary world at the time, a real-life tragedy involving hundreds of lost lives made the fantastical seem eerily possible. While the rumors might have ended there and faded into a disappointing conclusion that the men were lost at sea, more and more incidents popped up shortly thereafter and made that simple but unsatisfying conclusion harder to get behind. But the next story is sure to send chills up your spine. Just a year later, in 1881, perhaps the most mysterious encounter ever recorded in the Triangle took place. A 210-foot schooner, the Ellen Austin, set out on its regular route from Liverpool to New York City. Several weeks of sailing underway, Captain Griffin of the Ellen Austin redirected his course and found himself in the choppy waters of the Sargasso Sea. Quite a ways off course. The detour brought his crew into the sightline of another boat that seemed to be navigating without agenda. Out of curiosity, the Ellen Austin approached the ship only to discover the ship had been entirely abandoned, though its cargo and crew's quarters were untouched. Captain Griffin ordered some of his men to board the mystery boat so the two boats could carry on the rest of the journey in tandem. Once the boat was back in New York, its cargo could be unloaded and perhaps they could get to explore it for evidence of what happened to its crew. While the two ships got underway, a freak storm separated them. Not an uncommon occurrence with boats of that size in rough seas. When the clouds calmed, Captain Griffin spied the other boat and approached. Yet again, he found the boat abandoned. This time, it was his crew members who had gone missing without a trace. Out of fear that manning the ship once more might be a death sentence for his crew, Captain Griffin abandoned the ship and made a beeline for New York. leaving the boat that seemingly devoured humans fading into the horizon. But even a human-devouring boat pales in comparison to what has come to be known as the single largest loss of life in the US Navy's history, not involving combat, even to this day. Let's fast forward about 30 years to 1918. World War I is raging on in Europe, and Caribbean nations are reeling from the Spanish flu, which caused over 100,000 deaths. Race riots were breaking out all over the United States, while women were on the cusp of winning the right to vote. Essentially, headlines worldwide were saturated with news of historical events beyond comparison. But when 306 crew and passengers disappeared from the USS Cyclops, it was a big moment. With Lieutenant Commander G.W. Worley at the helm, this 550-foot-long boat disappeared without a trace. The vessel had played a role in World War I, transporting coal to ships all over the world. In March of 1918, the USS Cyclops was loaded with 11,000 tons of manganese ore to take from Rio de Janeiro to the United States. The vessel did make an unplanned stop on Barbados, her last known location. With 1,800 nautical miles to their destination, the USS Cyclops set out, but wasn't seen or heard from ever again. The last message from the crew read, "Weather fair, all well." Not even an SOS message from the seasoned crew of Navy sailors was sent. The USS Cyclops, perhaps in part due to its mythological name, sparked theories about the Lost City of Atlantis. Writer Charles Berlitz initially proposed that Atlantis had been swallowed up in the Bermuda Triangle and the Lost City had become a hub for paranormal activity. Maybe ghostly souls lost to the deep sought company. Or perhaps the USS Cyclops crashed into an underwater tower, its wreckage becoming a part of an undiscovered cityscape. Others questioned whether the manganese in the cargo might have exploded, or if a German U-boat lurked inconspicuously among the waves before sinking the collier ship. Perhaps it was a mutiny gone wrong that ended with everyone losing. Another theory that's a little more rooted in science pertains to methane bubbles. Undersea deposits of solid methane occasionally come to the surface in bubbles. When it's just one bubble, it does little damage, but some theorized about underwater eruptions, akin to a volcanic eruption. There is a lot of random chance about the position of a bubble to a ship's helm, but the thought of gas escaping from below being enough to sink a 500-foot ship makes you think twice about setting sail in the Bermuda Triangle. And, as we'll come to find out, those who fly planes have had experiences just as mysterious as their boating counterparts. But before we can look to the skies, we have one more boating phenomenon to explore: the ever-elusive ghost ships. Countless ships have ventured out into the Triangle's water and made it back to shore without fail. But the fact remains that there are many wrecks at the bottom of the ocean. There's a reason the area around Bermuda has even been called the shipwreck capital of the world. The most notable wrecks in Bermuda fell to their final resting site below the sea because of battles, crashes into reefs, and intentional ship scuttling to create reefs. But tragically, not every ship that goes missing is found, as the mysteries around the HMS Atalanta, Ellen Austin, and USS Cyclops show. Like the empty ship encountered by the Ellen Austin's crew, ghost ships are not all that uncommon in the Bermuda Triangle. While disappearances all presumably end with the same underwater fate for passengers and boat alike, ghost ships are recovered vessels with no trace of the crew that manned them. The mystery around them seems heightened in comparison to run-of-the-mill disappearances. Consequently, the theories attempting to explain what happened also seem to escalate, as you'll see in this next story. Jumping ahead just 3 years from when the USS Cyclops vanished, let's head to the waters east of North Carolina. The Carroll A. Deering was en route from Barbados to Norfolk, Virginia, headed north. A 5-masted schooner, the ship was manned by either 10 or 11 crew. On January 31, 1921, from the lighthouse on Cape Hatteras, the Coast Guard spotted the ship. To quote someone who saw it, like a flying Dutchman, the 5-masted schooner Carroll A. Deering loomed through the mists about Diamond Shoals today. All sails set, but unmanned. Truly a ghost ship flying across the waters. By the time the vessel reached the Diamond Shoals, an ever-changing topography of sandbars off the Outer Banks, the Carroll A. Deering was beyond repair. The Coast Guard ventured out onto the wreckage to find the ship entirely abandoned. According to reports, when they boarded, the sails were still set and food had been prepared, but left uneaten. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, attack, or even a mutiny. Just 2 days prior to the Deering's crash landing, the vessel had passed by the Cape Lookout lightship. As the two boats crossed paths, a crew member from the Deering had shouted out that they had lost both anchors, but otherwise all was well. So how did things escalate so quickly? Was the ship overtaken by pirates? Was there a mutiny? If so, why would they have abandoned a perfectly good, well-stocked ship? 3 months later, a man named Christopher Columbus Gray found a message in a bottle along the North Carolina shoreline. The message read, "Deering captured by oil-burning vessel, taking off everything and handcuffing the crew. Crew hiding all over ship, but no chance to escape." This major clue whipped up even more theories. The State Department launched an official investigation trying to find out if a band of pirates really were to blame. Questions then rose as to whether the crew's disappearance had a connection to politics at the time. Rumors grew about the possibility of Russian participation in the crew's disappearance. One newspaper reported a worldwide search going on for the Deering's crew. It theorized that the crew were thought to be Russian prisoners who had been kidnapped and escorted off the boat. But it turns out that the message in the bottle was a hoax. The man who had supposedly discovered it had written it. Eager to get someone from the Cape Hatteras lighthouse fired and take their job, Gray fabricated the only clue in the investigation. While the worldwide search fizzled out, strange new theories about alien abductions rose to the forefront, and the fervor surrounding missing ships made it all the way into one of the world's most famous director's movies. The disappearance that attracted the most theories about alien abductions was the disappearance of the Cotopaxi steamship. Steven Spielberg's 1977 sci-fi film Close Encounters of the Third Kind features the Cotopaxi. Spielberg has his characters come across the wreck of the Cotopaxi in a most unusual place, the Gobi Desert. This film built off of the theory that the Cotopaxi was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle, then sucked back up by aliens. Is it possible that the Cotopaxi really was abducted by aliens? Let's look into the nature of its disappearance. The SS Cotopaxi was a steamship loaded with a cargo of 3,800 tons of coal. Her route was from Charleston to Havana, and she had 32 crew members on board to guide her way. The Cotopaxi left on November 29, 1925, and was rumored to have encountered a tropical storm 2 days later. Then, she was never heard from again. According to the Associated Press, the crew reported the Cotopaxi had water in its hold and was listing badly. Before it vanished entirely, distress signals were sent out, but obviously no one was able to act in time. Most of the intrigue surrounding the Cotopaxi does not come about through its disappearance, but more so the multitude of theories that people came up with to explain 32 people's disappearances. Besides the extraterrestrial encounters that Spielberg illustrated in his film, people have claimed that the SS Cotopaxi became a ghost ship. In fact, a few online rumors circulated multiple websites in the 2010s that the Cotopaxi had been spotted, floating on the water. Supposedly, members of the Cuban Coast Guard spotted an unmanned vessel heading for the island and went to intercept it. 90 years after its disappearance, this news was astonishing. How had the steamship stayed afloat for so many years? And if it was that seaworthy, where was its crew? Perhaps the only thing more ominous than finding an entirely abandoned boat in the ocean is finding one with just one living being on board: a dog. And this is the exact circumstance of what happened when the Rubicon was found floating in the Bermuda Triangle. While boating technology today can make many parts of navigation user-friendly, and some sailboats today even have automated sails, in 1944, dogs could not man boats, and they still can't today either. As years of submarine warfare and naval battles came to an end, newspapers reported a ship found in the Gulf Stream without a crew. Found stranded 200 miles off the coast of Havana, the vessel was towed into Miami to be recovered. However, when a towboat arrived, they found someone on board. Per the Argus newspaper, only a dog was found aboard the Rubicon. The last entry in her logbook was made on September 26th when she was put into Havana. While there was an eyewitness to whatever transpired on the Rubicon's decks, no one could ask the lone survivor what happened to the Rubicon's crew. Was it another instance of alien intervention? Maybe the dog hid in just the right spot, or the extraterrestrials had their eyes on humans specifically. Had rough weather shaken the crew from their posts and into the sea? Perhaps part of the crew risked a mutiny, and a battle ensued, wiping out everyone. Or had something in the water of the Bermuda Triangle driven the humans to insanity? Scientists believe they have a logical answer to this phenomenon, as well as other disappearances, but first we'll need to look into the other notable topics surrounding the Bermuda Triangle: planes. The Bermuda Triangle does not have a vendetta against watercraft only. As air travel became increasingly popular for both military operations and recreational purposes, instances of planes disappearing into the Bermuda Triangle rose in tandem. Just over a year after the Rubicon was towed back to port, down a crew without explanation, one of the most notorious disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle took place. Known as Flight 19, a training mission on December 5, 1945, saw 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers fly east over the Atlantic for a routine flight and never return. The squadron of U.S. Navy planes was scheduled to fly in their own triangular formation, going east from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale for 141 miles, then north for 73 miles, and finally back over a final 140-mile leg to complete the exercise. Flight 19's location was last given as 75 miles northeast of Cocoa, Florida. When they took off, each plane had enough fuel for 5.5 hours of flying. The flight was scheduled to take only 3 hours and 13 minutes. When they gave their location for the last time, each plane had just over an hour's worth of fuel left. Records indicate that at that time, weather over the Sargasso Sea grew worse and sea conditions amplified. The airport in Miami reported a large area of turbulent weather developing from a storm raging over Georgia. By the time night fell, the storm had moved to the Miami area, creating squalls over the sea and generating 40-mile-an-hour winds at 1,000 feet elevation. Supposedly, 75-mile-an-hour winds were flying up 8,000 feet. When they realized the planes were missing, the naval station dispatched a number of planes to search for the missing aircrafts. A PBM Mariner flying boat set out from the NAS Banana River, north of Fort Lauderdale, with 13 men on board. Adding salt to the wound of an already tragic day, this rescue plane also never returned to base. That day, a total of 27 men were lost either at sea or to the sky. Reviewing the radio calls between the airmen and the base that day, it seemed that the seasoned pilots had found themselves lost over the ocean. An overhead radio call reported discrepancies between compass readings from the crew and the route they were supposed to be following. Strong winds had pushed them off course, and the crew struggled to figure out where they were. Like navigation on the seas, air travel relied heavily on using compasses to determine the proper direction of travel and how to find a location based on proximity to landmarks. But a leading theory about the Bermuda Triangle's frequency of accidents has to do with its location along an agonic line, a longitudinal line where there is no need to compensate for magnetic compass variation. It is one of 2 places in the world where true north and magnetic north are perfectly aligned, and compass variation does not need to be taken into consideration. When traveling at the pace of a ship, you have a little bit of time to check and double-check your navigation calculations to compensate for this cartographical anomaly. But for pilots traveling over 200 miles an hour while actively steering, calculations must be quick and accurate to keep on track. The complications of the agonic line on compasses most certainly does contribute to accidents at sea. The magnetic field beneath the Bermuda Triangle has been credited with confusing pilots and sailors alike, but the geography of the area creates confusing visual markers as well. From the skies, the many islands off the coast of Florida, the Bahamas, and the Caribbean in general makes navigation confusing for people determining their position in proximity to clusters of land they spot, which possibly could have played a role in the next story. Another plane disappeared in 1954. Flight 441 was a US-owned super constellation, also known as an R-7V1. Known for its ability to cross the Atlantic in just over 8 hours, this carrier plane regularly made intercontinental trips. But when it flew on October 30th from the Patuxent Naval Air Station in Maryland to Lajes in the Azores, the 42 people on board, including naval officers and their families, simply vanished. Its takeoff was normal and communicating normally for the first 400 miles of its journey. Then it went silent. After a 5-day search, not a single piece of debris was recovered, and the search had to be suspended due to inclement weather. The aircraft had no structural issues, the weather at the time of day was fine, and the pilot, Lieutenant Leonard, had flown the route for 2 years. The plane had weather radar on it and could have been in contact in advance if something had been detected. The Navy's Aviation Board indicated that structural failure could have been a possibility, but the likelihood was very remote. With a cargo of life vests, exposure suits, and life rafts, if the plane had exploded, search crews would have spotted some of this debris. But not a scrap of metal or any other indication that the plane made contact with the water had been found. However, there are scientific theories that could explain the disappearance. Perhaps a freak weather accident like an air bomb could have been to blame. Scientists recently coined this term air bomb, coming out of hexagonally shaped clouds that generate over the Atlantic Ocean. These clouds can release blasts of air that hit the ocean at speeds of over 170 miles an hour. These could easily send a plane plunging into the ocean or generate a wave capable of sinking a ship. One of the most recent disappearances tied to the Bermuda Triangle happened in 2017, when 4 people on board an MU-2B plane vanished on a trip from Puerto Rico to Titusville, Florida. About 3 hours into the flight, ATC in Miami lost communication with the plane at a height of 24,000 feet, while it was moving at a speed of 345 miles an hour. No inclement weather was reported at the time. The MU-2B vanished from radar as well. The next day, a search ensued, and the Coast Guard searched 8,200 square miles of ocean. But this story has more of a resolution than others. Unlike many of the earlier disappearances, the MU-2B had debris recovered from its crash 15 miles east of the island of Eleuthera of the Bahamas. Given the improved search and rescue capabilities of today's Coast Guards with better satellite signals and data recording devices required within planes, technology has given us better insight into what happened with a plane that followed suit of the other planes that had disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle before it. Had the search mobilized a few hours later, there's a chance no debris would have been recovered, and the mystery of the MU-2B could have gone down in infamy as a part of the Bermuda Triangle's lore, instead of having the truth that it went down in the sea revealed. But as we've seen, future developments have changed the narrative, raising the question of whether or not we should fear the Triangle today as much as we have in the past. But first, let's apply some modern discoveries to the past, and see if there's a more straightforward explanation to some of the theories we've explored. Boats, planes, and hundreds of human beings have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle. Theories about what went down have swirled in the aftermath of the disappearances. But we all know the expression, hindsight is 20/20. And with today's breakthroughs in tracking weather patterns, studying archaeological sites, and statistically predicting accidents, most of the theories around the Bermuda Triangle's famous accidents have been debunked. Let's run it back and look at what really might have happened in each of these tragic accidents. The Atalanta. For such a big ship and crew to go missing, people thought it must have been a big animal or a massive act of nature. A former crew member on the Atalanta, who was spared from its ill-fated end on the bottom of the sea, claimed that the HMS Atalanta was routinely loaded with too much cargo. He claimed to have seen the ship roll beyond 32 degrees in bad weather because of the heavy load. Throw an inexperienced crew on a training mission with low morale from rampant illness, and you have a recipe for human error and a sunken ship. The Ellen Austin's encounter. Did it really happen? The jury's out on whether or not this meeting with the mystery ship really happened. Lloyd's of London, an English insurance company, kept meticulous records of all ships posted as missing for the sake of settling insurance claims. Missing vessels books recorded the coming and goings of ships, and plenty of disappearances are recorded. The insurance company has commented on the case of the Ellen Austin and said that its journey went without incident, and no missing vessel of the description would have been in the area at the time. The USS Cyclops. Perhaps the most mysterious case, the absence of emergency communications does hint that something quick and debilitating happened to this ship. An officer who disembarked in Brazil from the Cyclops connected with the US Navy decades later to discuss the ship's problematic design and the issues amongst the crew at the time. He claimed that the ship's leader, Lieutenant Commander Worley, was unliked for his unwavering attitude yet overly cautious way of navigating. The officer pointed to the impressive weight of the cargo and noted the holds amidships were the only places that could hold that weight, but carrying a load as big as the Cyclops' final cargo haul meant placing some cargo in the fore and aft holds. Storing manganese there pressed on the Cyclops' structural weaknesses by placing stress on the hull. With the vessel's integrity compromised due to misstorage, it's likely that the USS Cyclops snapped into two pieces and rapidly sank. The Carroll A. Deering. According to Coast Guard Captain R.L. Gaskill, the four-mast schooner got caught up in 90-mile-an-hour winds reported at that time and found their vessel stranded on the outermost sandbar of Diamond Shoals. He suspected that the crew made a life-or-death decision to abandon their doomed vessel and risk their luck taking their lifeboats to shore. When the boat was found, none of its lifeboats were on board, supporting this theory. With a 9-mile journey to get to land, Gaskill doubts that they would have survived the journey in winds like that. In winds of that speed, waves can be very tall and capsize small vessels easily. It was a combination of being in the wrong place at the wrong time that doomed the crew of the Carroll A. Deering. The Cotopaxi. Rumors about the Cuban Coast Guard spotting the Cotopaxi were a part of a fake news trend, whereby news outlets would intentionally publish hoaxes to create intrigue and draw a big audience to their websites. And Steven Spielberg's inclusion of the Cotopaxi in Close Encounters of the Third Kind represents how creatives would build off fears, interests, and theories circulating in pop culture to create a sense of relevance in their work. While potentially disappointing to those who want to believe that aliens are at work in the Bermuda Triangle, the wreckage of the SS Cotopaxi has recently been identified in the waters off Florida. Just 35 miles off the coast of St. Augustine, the Cotopaxi sank in waters not even considered to be inside the Bermuda Triangle. Over the course of 15 years, marine biologists worked extensively, taking measurements and comparing blueprints to share their findings. Because of the many theories about what happened, the scientists wanted definitive proof that the wreck was the Cotopaxi before sharing the news. They cross-referenced their findings with a lawsuit filed by the relatives of the Cotopaxi's crew. The lawsuit mentions that a carpenter who had repaired hatch covers on the ship had encountered a few other vessels with a similar design that had structural flaws. He claimed that when water washed up on the deck, it would leak into the cargo hold and weigh down the ship. When you examine this design flaw in light of the tropical storm that the Cotopaxi supposedly encountered before sending out a distress signal, it's probable that the boat went down as a result of bad weather, bad design, and bad luck. The Rubicon, with only a dog on board, had the most simple explanation of all the ghost ships. It's widely suspected that the vessel actually left the port with no one on board. The second half of the news article cites suspicions from authorities that the Rubicon might have broken from her moorings in port and the unmanned vessel floated to sea with only the ship's resident canine on board. There was no crew to have gone missing. Flight 19. The training mission had been led by Navy Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor. During the war, he had accumulated over 2,500 flying hours, but he had become lost on 2 separate instances which required him to be rescued at sea. The day of the disappearances, Taylor had shown up late and asked to have someone else cover leading the training mission. This request was denied and proved to have terrible consequences. The tragedy of Flight 19 is chopped up to a number of human errors that all happened to coincide. First and foremost, it was a training mission where Lieutenant Taylor chose to monitor from the back of the squadron rather than the lead, and rookie mistakes in navigation could have led the whole crew astray. Even though it was an experienced crew, human error is something no one can avoid with absolute certainty. When the mission's leader had only flown in that region a few times, their attempts to find their footing and confirm their location took far longer than it should have. When you're flying with only a few hours of fuel, mistakes like that can have huge consequences. As for the rescue plan that disappeared in an effort to find Flight 19, the PBM Mariner was a specially designed rescue craft. But among those who flew them, these planes had the unfortunate nickname of flying gas tanks because of the large amount of fuel they carried on board to fly long stretches of time on patrol. Before taking off, it was routine for pilots to confiscate matches and lighters from the crew, as these planes were highly flammable from gas fumes. It's believed that the PBM Mariner exploded 2 hours after it took off. A passing merchant ship spotted a fireball and found evidence of an oil slick in the water around the time it was navigating the waters. Unfortunately, in-air explosions weren't entirely unheard of at that time. Flight 441. It could have exploded, but why wasn't a trace of the plane spotted? While today search and rescue missions have become successful in finding debris on the open ocean, humans would be foolish to think of missions over the Atlantic Ocean for debris as anything other than a search for a needle in a haystack. Water currents can move objects in many directions, storms can whip up waves that damage and sink life rafts, and sometimes the human eye might miss the one floating life jacket among an expanse of hundreds of miles of untouched sea. The Navy's Aviation Board ultimately concluded, quote, R-7V1 Buno 128441 did meet with a sudden and violent force that rendered the aircraft no longer airworthy and was thereby beyond the scope of human endeavor to control. The force that rendered the aircraft uncontrollable is unknown. It's tragic, but some accidents will forever be just that, accidents. With unknown causes, unsatisfying conclusions, and an unbearable amount of pain for the families of the lost, whose final moments will be lost in mystery. Most of the mysterious accidents in the Bermuda Triangle can be attributed to human error, bad weather, or just an accident at sea. Perhaps it's because so few wrecks have been recovered that people have been so intrigued by the theories and stories. But the Atlantic Ocean is very deep, averaging a depth of 11,962 feet and reaching 27,493 off the Puerto Rico Trench. Deep vertical caves dotted throughout the Bermuda Triangle can create current that can sweep up debris and make recovery impossible. If a ship goes down, it's likely going to stay there where it landed, in a place where neither life nor light lingers too long. Perhaps one of the biggest questions of all is if the Bermuda Triangle disappearances are even higher than other parts of the world. We'll get to that, but like the accident in 2017 proved, our technology has improved, and the more evidence we can find as close as possible to an accident, the higher our chances of finding out what actually happened. So what do we have to fear in the Bermuda Triangle today? There is a healthy level of fear to have when boarding a boat or plane, in the same way that you should have when getting in a car. Accidents happen, technology malfunctions, and people can get hurt. Both the US Coast Guard and Lloyd's of London don't think that there are any more instances of lost or wrecked vessels in the Bermuda Triangle than in other places. Going out in a boat or flying in a plane comes with inherent danger. But there is no inherent danger to the Bermuda Triangle that doesn't exist in other regions of the world. It is a tragic reality, but the nature of the sea and skies is that when humans venture out into them, we are at the mercy of Mother Nature. But the area known as the Bermuda Triangle does see more boat and plane traffic than many other regions of the world, given its location along heavily trafficked shipping routes and being at the intersection of 4 continents. Where there are more boats and planes, naturally it follows that there would be more accidents. Whether in the Bermuda Triangle or elsewhere, planes and boats see less people die on average than cars, something many people incorporate into their daily routines. Humans' level of comfort with danger comes with our familiarity. The Bermuda Triangle is a massive stretch of water, reaching depths we can't reach and supporting life forms we have still yet to see. The mystery of the unknown gives our imagination room to invent, and while logical explanations of human error and weather are to explain for many of the Bermuda Triangle's stories, there have been mysteries about vanished planes all over the world, even in recent years. SS Waratah was a passenger ship set to sail between Australia and Europe. With 211 people on board, this 465-foot boat vanished in 1908 off the coast of South Africa and has still yet to be recovered. The first female pilot to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, Amelia Earhart, was on her second attempt to circumnavigate the globe in 1937 when she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. Rumors swirled about Earhart being a secret agent, or even that she crash-landed and started a new life on a remote island. The disappearance of the celebrity and incredibly skilled pilot goes to show that accidents can happen to anyone, and that tragedy over the seas can strike in the airs, not just above the Bermuda Triangle. The Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, known as the Miracle of the Andes, saw a plane crash high in the Andes mountain range, but at the time, no one saw. For 2 months after a search had been called off, survivors were fending off freezing temperatures and resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. 16 survivors were miraculously rescued. This event in 1972 gave families of those lost in disappearances for years to come hope that their loved ones would have survived crashes, and gave them inspiration to continue looking long after searches had been called off. Most recently, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a commercial passenger jet with 239 people on board, became one of history's most mysterious airplane disappearances. Documentaries have been made, podcasts created, and books have been written about what happened to the hundreds of people who vanished. Even in a day and age of unparalleled satellite imagery and radar detection, scanning the entirety of the Indian Ocean's surface, let alone what lies on its floor, is impossible today. But maybe one day we'll come across more wrecks to unveil the truth about the mysterious ends of these vehicles. But for now, the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle has been somewhat dispelled. Neither aliens, nor wormholes, nor mermaids seeking revenge are to blame. Rather, a coincidence of human errors, faulty designs, bad weather, and accidents are the common thread between the boats and planes that have met with odd ends in this region of the Atlantic Ocean. The Bermuda Triangle will live on for a long time to come, given its prominent role in pop culture. It's inspired movies and ghost stories around campfires, but its fantastical mystique has also distracted from the tragedy of people losing their lives. Today, developments in safety measures and search and rescue advancements makes the occasional accident so notable. While the public knows the Bermuda Triangle in and out based on its many stories and mystical powers, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names does not recognize the Bermuda Triangle as an official name, and does not maintain an official file on the area. It might not live on in science since theories about it have been debunked, but its role as a cultural relic is undeniable and will live on for generations to come. Thanks for watching.